So a big welcome to everybody as they start trickling in. I think a lot of people are still connecting to audio. So welcome to, sadly, our final day of Gather 2024. It's been a wonderful year so far. Wonderful 3 days and wonderful year. It's hard to believe that it's already coming to an end. The last 2 days have really flown by. Yeah, and I'm here joined by Katrina from Nala and Danielle as well. So how are you doing, Katrina? Have you enjoyed the last couple of days?
It's been great. Thanks, Erica. Yeah, I've really got so much out of it, so much to bring back to the organization, and well done to everybody involved. It's been fantastic 2 days so far.
Yeah, I agree. And I think my favorite thing from yesterday is just the connections that were made in the chat. I saw people saying, oh, I'd like to use this product, or, I'd love to do this at my institute. How do you do this? Those kind of little like tidbits and connections that wouldn't happen anywhere else. I think that was really valuable and really exciting to see, kind of developing this sense of the AT community, which is one
Yes,
of the goals of the event. I think it's working.
yes, definitely. And I mean, there's so much, coming ahead in terms of, the directive for 2025 as well. So this is really important. I think Dara summed it up excellently yesterday.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And we have another exciting day today as well. Kind of a few more practical tips as well as kind of overarching big picture type of things, like similar to what we had yesterday. So we'll be able to leave here with a few kind of takeaways and kind of direct things that we can change, but we'll also be able to leave here with a bigger knowledge of AT and of kind of trends in the sector. So I really love that it's not boring. We do all sorts of different things. So it's combining, big picture changes with kind of small takeaways. I think it's another valuable part of Gather. Yeah. So just a few tidbits of housekeeping before we kick off here. A few things just to be aware of and keep in mind. I know we've been saying them every day, but it's just important to know that we will have another break today scheduled for 10:50 for about 10 minutes. Feel free to re-up your coffee or tea or grab a pastry. We've been living off of the pastries here at Ahead, especially on day 3. We're pastry heavy by now. Also, there are captions available thanks to our wonderful partners in PCR. So if you click the CC button at the bottom of your screen, you should be able to add captions if you'd like them. We do take questions. I think we should be able to take questions for most of our speakers today. We kind of try to plan them in to be able to have questions. So you can do this either by typing them in the chat, or since this is a meeting format, you can raise your hand or come off of Zoom, or come off of mute rather, and speak into your microphone, and we'll be able to hear your questions. Another one, once again, recordings will be made available after the event, so you'll be able to find these on our website. I think recordings from day 1 are already up there, but recordings from the following 2 days will be up in due time. Slides as well as speaker information is also available on the website. So we're kind of all here for you. And just a reminder that you are allowed to ask questions. We encourage you to chat, be friendly in the chat, talk about the weather, a favorite thing of ours to talk about, I know. So feel free to use the chat. And then lastly, just some more thank yous. I've been doing this every day, but I think it's so important. A huge thank you to the team in Ahead, who's done a huge amount of work, especially Danielle, who's been kind of busy running around the back end, who's kind of pulled this whole event together, done a wonderful job. Also to Nala and Aintus, who have really helped us out and done a huge kind of role in this event as well. PCR, who have done our captioning for the event, are always kind of there on time and always working away in the background. And thank you to our wonderful presenters, who they're not being paid for this. They've dedicated their time for a wonderful event. And then lastly, our funders, particularly Solus, who has done a great job with this as well. Perfect. I might just read out some of these weather things since they're my favorite things to talk about. So let's see what the weather's like in Ireland. Sunny Dublin. I'm in Dublin and it's not too sunny where I am. So it's strange how that works, isn't it? In Harold's Cross, it's a little bit gloomy. What about where you are, Katrina? How's the weather?
It's yeah, it's quite overcast here today. I'm in Rathfarnham.
Yeah, I'm in Harold's Cross. So yeah, I see heavy is probably a good word to summarize the weather. I never heard that as a weather word, but
Yeah.
it does feel heavy. Perfect. I think we're just a couple minutes early, but we might just get going. Also gloomy in Dublin too, and cloudy in Ennis. I think we had our sun maybe for the weekend, and then it might have gone away for a little bit. Overcast in Limerick, super cloudy in Galway. It's also cool to know people are coming from all over the country. It's nice to hear. Overcast, and it's overcast all over the country, so we don't have to be jealous of anyone really. Gray and Glasnevin. Quiva's saying we're only allowed one nice day a week at the moment, but maybe that'll change soon. Cool. So we might just kick off. We're a couple minutes early, but I think our speakers from Dyslexia Ireland will have a lot to say. I'm really looking forward to our first session today. So if you wouldn't mind highlighting these two speakers, we'll just get kicked off. Let me see here. Perfect. So day one, we have Donald Ewing and Michelle Kinsella for talking about AT for managing dyslexia from Dyslexia Ireland. Really excited for this presentation. So whenever you're ready, go ahead and kick off.
Thanks, Erica. Good morning, everybody. Very happy to be here this morning. It's fantastic to come together to talk about this, especially in the age of AI, where everything seems to be changing rapidly. I think it's important to have this conversation. So just to let you know the way we're going to approach this. So firstly, my name is Michelle Kinsella. I'm the interim literacy coordinator with DAI at the moment. I also work in a number of other areas, and Maynooth University being one of them. So I teach students from neurodiversity is sort of something that is just typical in every classroom. It has always been, but it's more so now because people are speaking about it. So Donald is an educational psychologist and the head of policy, training and policy at Dyslexia Ireland. So the way we're going to do today is like a conversation. So I'm going to pose some questions to Donald. He's going to answer them so that it's like you're going to be listening in to two people having a conversation about AT. And then we're going to leave space at 5 minutes at the end for you guys to ask questions. So if you want to jot down things while we're chatting, that kind of strike you, or even in the chat there, if you don't want to come on after and ask questions. So yeah, that's what we're going to do. I don't have many slides. I just have the questions so that you can see kind of what we're talking about. So I'm just going to share my screen now. Give me one sec. Donald, how rude of me. Would you like to introduce yourself, actually? I know I've introduced you, but would you like to say hello?
Hello, everybody. Good morning. I'm devastated about the lack of pastries in my particular setting here. So Erica's just talking up. I forget about the weather. The lack of carbs is a real problem for me at this time in the morning. But
We
otherwise,
might be able to send some over, Donald.
that'd be lovely.
Okay, so Donald, can you let me know, are you seeing my screen and is it in slide mode?
Not in slide mode yet. Just hit the presenting. Yeah.
Okay, there we go.
Lovely. Perfect.
Okay. So we've done the introduction. So what I'm going to do is just launch into the questions now. So I'm going to pose 3 questions. I'm going to let Donald talk at length around the answers to those questions. And as I said, you jot down anything that's important to you so that you can kind of fill in the blanks for yourself then afterwards. So Donald, good morning. I'm going.
Hello. Hello, Michelle. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
You're very welcome. So I'm going to start by just asking you, assistive technology, very basic question, is it helpful for students with dyslexia?
Yeah, so the short non-politician's answer would be yes, 100% it is. And I think for a long time we've known that, and technology increasingly is something that is the norm. In fact, there are some colleagues within Dyslexia Ireland who would question the word assistive anymore, and would maybe just say, maybe this is just technology. And it made me think, when we're having that conversation about, if we're talking about universal design in curriculums and maybe an assessment, then maybe also technology is just something that everybody uses, and some people use it to a different extent. Whereas in the past, assistive technology was seen as something different from technology. And we still have that in the school system. We still have, grants go to national schools and secondary schools for technology. And then there's also a separate grant for assistive technology. Now, in terms of some additional needs, there is a need for separate thinking, for separate devices, for quite unique and maybe quite bespoke technological solutions. For our own advocacy kind of group, Dyslexia, increasingly, we are talking about free and built-in stuff that people have on their devices, on laptops, on phones, on iPads, etc. And by and large, we're talking about stuff that anyone joining this call will probably know more than me about, but text to speech, speech to text, immersive reader, spell checks, spelling and grammar checks. You know, a lot of that stuff is built into the everyday software that we use in offices and in lecture theatres and in classrooms, or it's built into not just software, but it's built into the hardware that we have in our pockets or our handbags. So increasingly, it's the norm. And actually, if you speak to an adult dyslexic individual who's working in an office somewhere in Dublin today, and you're saying, do you use assistive technology? They might say to you, well, I use technology, and I probably use it slightly differently from the colleague sitting next to me, but I don't have a flag above me saying I use assistive technology, certainly not for dyslexia. So increasingly, it's just something that is being normalised, which we think is probably quite a good thing. There is also a financial aspect to that as well, because if there was a student who started at a third level institution back in 2012, who actually came into our office, our old office at the bottom of Grafton Street in Dublin, and they had a big thick laptop and 3 CD-ROMs of different types of software, and said, I've just been given this by the college, can you help me? I don't know what to do. Now, they were starting an architectural degree, and all of a sudden they had much more homework than any of their colleagues, because they had to come in to learn how to use all this stuff. Increasingly now it's just saying, can I turn this on?
Yeah, actually, that's a really, can I just interrupt you there? Because that's a really good point. I see that in the university all the time, where people say that they need reasonable accommodations and they have difficulties, and they feel like they're going to get from the Access Office like a lot of support and help that kind of makes their life easier. But sometimes then they feel like it's cumbersome, the things that they're offered, when oftentimes a couple of easy free tools are easier for them to implement and just build into their lives. So I know at Dyslexia Ireland, we do a lot of that. So with the Adult Dyslexia Hub, we have videos there that explain, you know, using things that are just available to everybody. And you just brought up something there for me, the second question there. So we still see in the reports from psychologists references to things such as Dragon, text help and things like that, which cost money, but also it's a new thing you've got to learn. So I often wonder that if we're giving people reasonable accommodations, why are we making their lives harder in some ways by now saying you also need to add this to everything else and adult learners are often overwhelmed, and they're often feeling like, you know, snowed under by all the new stuff that they're trying to take in, and then we give them more stuff. So I do wonder about that, whether we're hindering or helping. Could you speak to that for a minute?
Yeah, and I mean, everyone here is probably quite tech positive, if that's a phrase we can use. But some of our learners at different levels might be returning to education and might be very nervous about some of the more basic technology, and they're maybe managing more than one email account. They're managing an online learning platform where posts and assignments are meant, you know, they're having to download slides. For us, that might be quite normal. But even as a reasonably competent professional, I sometimes find things like that quite challenging. And I think if you're in a new environment, you're also being tasked to, you know, obviously there's a learning component of the course, and then there's a lot of extra stuff to get your head around. It's possibly not ideal. And there's some fantastic software out there that we're aware of and has been around for a long time. The cost is an issue because some of the software is hundreds of euro. And often, I suppose for this environment, often it's institutions that are paying that, or paying a subscription, or paying a license. But I sometimes wonder why, and we see a lot of psychological reports for individuals, and sometimes people get updated reviews and things for going to college. They don't need to, but they sometimes do. And you'll see sometimes psychologists writing the names of companies like the ones we've just sort of mentioned there, and you're sort of saying, how do you know that? How do you know that that's what they need? One of the approaches that we talk about in the office is taking a staged approach. So that might be what you need, but a bit like a good doctor would say, well, before we cut you open in the surgical theatre, we're going to see if you know, some drugs might help or some acupuncture might help. So we try the minimum intervention before we go to the big heavy hitters. And that's the approach we usually take if we're downloading an app. If we thought, oh, that'd be lovely, that would improve my life, we go for the light version or the free version first before we're clear about extra features that might actually, we we don't need or we wouldn't use or wouldn't be value for money. So when we're thinking about text to speech, we might be thinking, well, do you know what? Microsoft 365 has text to speech. Read aloud, and you just click it from the button. Or my MacBook has text to speech, and you can actually change the accent, change the speed, and it's giving me everything I need. So I'm not always sure. And in third level, maybe higher education particularly, we're maybe still in a model where we think that we need to go straight to the top of a tariff for dyslexic learners, when budgets are really, really tight everywhere else, and everything's being scrutinised, every budget line is being scrutinised. I just sometimes wonder, could we use that funding for other things or in other ways? And then we're just enabling students to use the functionality that's built into regular software like Google Docs, Microsoft, Apple Pages, whatever we normally use or what the institution would encourage. We think about how that interacts with our online learning platforms, and then we think about also the device that is a Chromebook or an iPad or a Lenovo laptop. We're saying, how can we help you adjust there? So that for me is much more of that universal bottom-up approach. And I don't have an answer to it, but it's a question and a discussion that we've had in the office for a few years now. But we didn't have that back in 2012, 2013. We would used to have reps from these companies say, this is all the stuff we would do. And we would go, that's amazing. But now that amazingness is built into our little bricks in our pockets.
Yeah, I think I agree. And I'd invite others who are listening at the moment, like if you have any questions around that, around how do we, because I think it's a good discussion to have, and maybe we haven't come to the answers yet, but how do we make it easier for students and people in the workplace? How do we make it easier for people to use the technology that becomes seamless to them? So we all, when we began, well, most of us here, there's probably some very young people here, and I apologize if I'm assuming we're all of a certain kind of bracket. But I think we've all seen changes in technology happen over the years. And at first it's clunky trying to get used to the new app, or when WhatsApp does updates and things, but we use it now so naturally. And I think I would love to get to a place with students where you could go to your access office and they could just give you the support maybe to get up and running with that stuff that you already had some background knowledge to. So a lot of the challenges with learning new things is if we don't have that metacognition piece, where we're looking at what do I already know in this space, and then how do I build on it? It can leave a leap so big that it's actually more difficult. So I've known lots of dyslexic learners over the years who have been given software that they've just cast aside because they say it actually is just hindering me, rather than something that's just in your pocket, as you say, and you can use regularly. So I think that's a really interesting discussion, and something that maybe as a collective of educators and stuff, we need to start thinking about.
It's funny, I actually started a new job a few years ago and I had a brief sojourn into the civil service, and I was handed a work phone, and it was a different device from one that I was used to. And in a most stressful week of, already quite stressful week starting a new job, I had to get my head around a phone that I couldn't work. And I'm fairly competent at doing stuff. Well, my daughter might disagree, but I'm fairly competent at IT. And I couldn't, one of the biggest stressors in starting a new job, brand new policy area, brand new colleagues, traveling abroad immediately, and I was trying to navigate my phone to get a boarding pass, and I couldn't do it. I had to Google how to download something on a different device. So for me, it's symptomatic of there's already enough pressures and stresses at the point where you're maybe starting or restarting education at third level of whatever type, and then we throw this into the mix. It can sometimes just be, as you say, these things are maybe just put on a shelf and gather dust.
Yeah, I think so. And that's a big discussion, but I want to make sure we leave 5 minutes at the end for people to come in. But so the last thing I want to talk to you about, and maybe this one is the one that we'll have to park, because I can just imagine this will blow up. Like we had that Oireachtas submission there during the week from DAI, around extra time in the leave insert. And one of the things we're always faced with are questions around, well, is this going to be safe in an exam? Or, there's that tension between what the institutions expect and what we think is best for people. So could you talk about that a little bit? Like if we did use the stuff that's on our phones, can we get that through an exam situation?
Yeah, I mean, this is in many ways, when you think about schools, I know national schools where principals have said to me, or learning support coordinators have said to me, we're worried about giving him a laptop, even though he clearly needs it, because it might be ripped away from him just before the exam, which is true, because the way that the accommodations work for the State Exam Commission means that you have to pass a particular eligibility in third year. And so there's a negative incentive to give people what they need because it might be taken away from them. And one of the key challenges, and it's never been more pressing as an issue with AI, is how do we ensure that the integrity of the exam is preserved. So traditionally in schools, we've used this more standalone software, what I still kind of in my head see as a CD-ROM, which can be kind of locked down and you don't need internet access.
Yeah.
And because the thought of having a Wi-Fi signal during an exam would mean that there'd be potential for obviously cheating, etc. I don't know if careful invigilation like we would do in most exam halls wouldn't actually have always addressed that. But anyway, so this is one of the reasons maybe why this standalone software has been preferred, because it provides that security and that sort of offlineness in exam situations particularly. Not so much obviously with coursework or assignments. So the two conversations I've had in the last month, one with Microsoft and one with the head of education for Google, who I bumped into at an event in Google headquarters that was organised by Wriggle. I managed to have conversations with two people and they said, it's simple to make sure that you have access to this sort of cloud-based text-to-speech, speech-to-text. You can very easily protect that channel to the cloud and make sure there's no access to other things. It's the simplest sort of firewall-y type approach that you could think of. So if you think about all the things we can do, surely we could, when you think about it, we could probably do that no problem. So I think it would be then a student saying, I'm used to using this particular software. Let's just name it Microsoft Word. I'm used to using read aloud and dictation. I'm used to using it for assignments all the way through school. I'd like to use it in third level. I'd like to maybe use it in an exam. Would that be possible? Maybe the responsibility, is it a reasonable adjustment after all? The responsibility on the institution is to say, yes, we will afford you to use what you would like to use, what you have been using, and what is free to use. We just have to get some systems in order so that if you want to use that, we have to make sure it's kind of relatively safe. But again, and certainly in schools, kids using or young people using laptops, we'd be in a small room separate from the big room anyway. If I was an invigilator, just by sitting on a seat and looking around, I'd be able to tell even if somebody was going awry with what they were supposed to or being allowed to do. Yeah. So I think there's, put it this way, I don't know the solution in terms of algorithms or in terms of click this, open this and drop down here. But the tech industry experts that I've spoken to said this is simple beans.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, that brings us nicely up to 5:02, and I know our session ends at 10 o'clock. So can I stop sharing now, and I'll just open the floor to insights, comments, questions from the rest of the attendees. Would anybody like to ask us a direct question or just make a comment, or are you impacted by anything that we've discussed? And please say yes, otherwise we're just going to have to keep talking for another 5 minutes.
How you doing?
Hi, John.
How you doing? Couldn't ask, with open source software, I was wondering, does it need customization then for individuals, or do you just, or generally when it's used, is it used like as a standard package?
I don't know. Understand the question. I'm so sorry. Open source meaning?
Yeah, well, open source software, so similar to this open source text to speech and that there, like software that's out there. So it is like out there. Then you could customize it then towards individuals' preferences, like out there. So it is so. Trust, I'm not an expert in this field. I was just wondering like how the process works. Like out there, I thought the packages you mentioned were open source, or do you mean? Sorry about that.
So the general package that we would we have in our adult dyslexia hub would be showing how it works on an Apple iPad, showing how it works on a Google phone, showing how it works on a general laptop with Microsoft 365. There may be other additional sort of plugins and add-ons, or indeed open source stuff that does the same thing. The key thing I think would be that, so I have a pal who actually works for a very small sort of startup company, and he's just started employing staff, and one of these new members of his team, who's apparently absolutely fantastic, is dyslexic, and said, look, just letting you know. And he immediately thought, right, I'm going to have to spend a lot of money now. And because in his head, it was like, we have to customize. And he said, you don't have to do anything. I will take responsibility for customizing my IT environment. So, and I know what works. And there was no cost and there was no ask of the employer. But compare that to maybe working in a big organization, and a rather clunky approach would be, okay, so you need this package and we need to get a license to this. And the person might be saying, well, okay, you could give me that if you want, but it's like offering someone a third phone. I've already got, you know, an ability to do what I need to do. I just want you to allow it, facilitate it, or indeed encourage it, or in a really good learning environment, and share it with other peers who might benefit from the same insights. And then simple things like, I'm downloading the slides for my lecture tomorrow afternoon, and I'm using, I don't even say screen reading software. It sounds hard, doesn't it? I just use in Microsoft, I select the text and it's read out loud to me. So something, I think we're actually, I suppose my question is, should it not, for a lot of learners with dyslexia, it could be and maybe should be as simple as that. And then the role of colleges, institutions and disability inclusion services is to customize or help the individual customize the environment. And that might be cost saving, but also just for the impact for the individual, it might actually include them more, it might actually enable them more than the traditional approach. A quick story about that was that there was a tourism organization which closed down its digital marketing department about 2012, and everyone was up in arms saying, how can you close a digital marketing department? That was all the Facebooks and the emerging stuff compared to the print and the TV and the newspaper. And they said, oh, we've just stopped calling it digital marketing because of course digital is just marketing now. Almost everything we do is to do with that. So in terms of closing down the word assistive, we're just talking about technology now, rather than something add-on or bespoke, which fits with that universal design kind of vibe, I suppose.
Donald, I'm going to have to stop you there because we have 1 minute left. Thanks, John, for that question. I hope,
thank you.
I hope that made sense. And in the comments, actually, people have been saying very similar things. So Jane is in MTU, and that is her experience as well. The students are often creative, she says, coming up with ideas. And then it's just about like, how do we support them in the adjustments they need or understanding how to use the tech? Other people are saying very similar, working with third level students, and they didn't know they could use immersive reader. So showing our students all of the stuff that's free and available to them empowers them, because they've ownership over it then, rather than them feeling something needs to be prescribed for them, they can kind of decide for themselves. So loads of lovely comments there. Thank you so much, everybody, for those comments. And as I said, it's a continuing conversation. Like, this is just a discussion that's beginning, because things are changing quite rapidly in the space of tech. So I hope that was useful, and you can reach myself and Donald, the team at Ahead will give you the slides. So you can reach us at Dyslexia Ireland if you want to. Erica, bang on 10 o'clock. Thank you very much.
Don't know how you did it exactly on time. There was one more question in the chat, but I think you, with your email address in there, they might be able to reach out to you via email. So
I'll put our email addresses in here.
Thank you so much. Very informative and very kind of laid back and comfortable asking questions. So thank you so much for that.
No worries.